Photography Basics 101, the most frequently asked questions by those of you who are just getting into photography. In today's video, what I'm going to be doing is just going over a couple of basic areas of photography that are really centered on questions that I've been asked in the past from people just getting into photography. And this video is going to be the first of a series to help you guys get more comfortable with your cameras and creating settings for your food photography. All right, so let's get to question number 1. What is aperture? Aperture is this area within your lens that is basically an expandable ring that allows light to come in. It also controls the depth in which is in focus. So basically what I'm saying is within your lens, when setting an aperture setting of say 2, your rings are expanding out so that the hole itself is much larger. It's very big, letting in a lot of light, but your area of focus, so the spot that you're focusing on, will be much smaller. Whereas if you had an aperture number of say 22, the hole gets smaller, the rings of the aperture itself tighten in, so less light goes into the hole, and you actually end up with a bigger area of focus. So an aperture of 22 is actually a large section of focus. You wouldn't actually use that for food photography, but if you are also using your camera to go out and enjoy life and take photos on vacation, do some landscape photography, that kind of stuff, that kind of aperture setting might be more appealing to you when you're out in a forest or staring at a mountain or something like that. You might want to have everything in the frame in focus. So that's when you do something that large for this type of a camera, like environment. You know, for food photography, you would not use 22, okay guys? Do not use f22. What is a shutter speed? Well, the answer to that is a shutter is an object inside of your camera that is taking the photo. It is one of the mechanisms used in tandem with other settings that allow you to capture your image. So a shutter, the object inside your camera, is something that is moving. It dictates the speed in which your photo is being captured. So if you have a fast shutter speed, it's going fast. If you have a slow shutter speed, it's going up and then down slowly. So shutter speeds are actually dictated in a second. So if you're having a shutter speed, it'll be 1/125th. And a setting like that is a really fast shutter speed. It allows for freeze framing, for there to be no motion in the shot. If you're going to have a slow shutter speed, you actually will let in more light, but your objects will blur. So, what does that mean by having slow, fast, light, blur? Fast shutter speeds are used in a very bright environment when you want to capture an image and not have it overexposed. It's also used when you want to capture something falling mid-motion, or you want to get a car moving and frozen in the frame without any motion blur. Where if, for example, you wanted to photograph a waterfall, so the flowing water, or say water coming out of a jug for your food photography, and you wanted it to have some nice flow, like an air to it, you would actually have a you'd have a slower shutter speed. So then that way it's open longer, but the longer you keep it open, the more light you're letting in to your frame. So shutter speed controls two things, just like an aperture does. It controls light and speed. What is ISO? Okay, so back in the day of film, ISO was the sensitivity of the film inside your camera. And it's the same thing today with digital cameras. But now it's about how your sensor is sensitive to light. So it's all about how your sensor absorbs the light that's being captured through the lens. So this too works in tandem with your aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO. All of these three settings are going to be dictating how your image looks. Now, a ISO, when used in a bright environment, you would want to have a lower number. So say for example 200. You would have an ISO setting of 200. You'd be in a bright environment, and what that means is your sensor is not super sensitive to light. So it recognizes light, it takes the light in, but it's not trying to go, oh my god, it's dark in here, I need to brighten everything up. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe it. And then say for example, you're in a dark environment, you're inside your house, it's at nighttime, you want to take a shot, but to our eyes, because our eyes adjust naturally to our environments, our eyes will read the room as bright enough, but then we'll put our camera down and it will come out with a black photo. Or, you know, if the opposite and we're outside, for example, on a bright sunny day, it might actually come out all white. So in a dark environment with your ISO setting at a higher number, so say 3200, you're actually absorbing more light. It actually allows the sensor to become more sensitive to light, which makes your image brighter. What's the difference between program mode, auto, and manual mode? On every camera, there are several setting options, but the most frequently used and most frequently asked question when it comes to the differences between them are between your auto, your program, and your manual. So, auto mode. Your camera is doing everything for itself. It's a little computer, it's dictating, it's censoring, it's reading, it's going, okay, it's this in this room, this is what I need to take this photo. But in program mode? In program mode, what's happening is your camera is still doing auto settings, only now you can override them. So say for example, your camera is saying, we're outside, it's really bright, I want to have a fast shutter speed. But what you want to do is actually have a slower shutter speed to get a little bit of flow to the image. You can go in and adjust your shutter. Same thing goes if you're indoors and you're taking photos of a cake inside your bakery, or maybe you're taking a photo of like this new dish and you want to put it on social media because you just made a new steak. I don't know. And you want to take a shot, but it's dark inside. Your camera on program mode will dictate what it wants the image to be. But if you found that the ISO setting was raised way too high, so your image is actually getting grainy, because that's the downside to ISOs and cameras. The higher you go, the more sensitive your sensor becomes, but depending on your camera model, it actually can end up being grainy. So and it won't be good grain, like, you know, old film days when you had beautiful grain in a photo. Digital grain is actually icky. It's the best way to describe it. So you might want to actually lower the ISO and maybe grab a light or sit near a window, or maybe make some slight adjustments that way. Manual mode is where you do everything. Okay, it's where you're going to be setting all of your settings. It's manual, it's you, it's the user of the camera. And that's why you want to know what all the different settings are within your camera. That's why you want to get familiar and comfortable with your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. Because that way when you're in manual mode, you can tell your camera exactly what you want, because you know the exact environment that you're in. Whew, okay, I know that was a lot of information. I just jam-packed right into your noggin right there. But don't worry, I'm gonna switch over to a voiceover any second now. And what's gonna happen is I'm gonna show you some photos, and I'm gonna actually go over what Aperture does to the photo, what shutter speed does to the photo, and what ISO does to your photo. That way you can see what I'm talking about, but also so we can discuss it again a little further, and it can just help meld it all in there, help you learn a little, because yeah, visuals and repetition, I'm a firm believer in those for learning, so let's do it. Okay, so this is future Leah speaking in voiceover form. What I have here for you guys is about 6 photos I want to show you with some examples. I'm going to start off with this one here and explain what it is, why it is, and yeah, so let's get started. So first, as you can see, the photo before you is really dark. You can barely even see what the photo is of. So you might not even be able to see based on the screen that you're using to view this video. But there is very little amount of information at the bottom of the frame. And the reason why this photo came out so dark is because of the settings I have for my camera. Now, typically when I take my photos in studio, I'm using lights that I control. So I'm using a strobe or a constant LED light panel that allows me to make my camera adjustments based on what I prefer to have the image look like. Instead of using daylight, which is available through a window, a doorway, so available, in your home or at the, studio, bakery, restaurant, wherever you are taking your photos, that might be a more ideal location for you guys right now as you first get into taking photos for your social media and your website and things like that. You might not be right away ready to get as advanced as I am. And for today's purpose, to show you how to use Aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, I'm using the available light that's in studio for me. And the available light in my studio are my lights on my ceiling and the daylight that comes through the tiniest of windows that a studio could ever have. It's like maybe a 16 by 20, probably smaller. It looks smaller. I'm guessing it's 16 by 20 because yeah, you know what? Actually, maybe it's 11 by 14. It's a small window, so there's not a lot of light. So when I use these shutters, like this shutter speed of 1/125th, which is a fast shutter speed, I'm not letting in a lot of light, even though I'm using an aperture setting of 4.5. So a 4.5 aperture setting has that large hole in it. So there is a lot more light coming in, but when paired with a fast shutter speed, it's still not enough light to compensate. Nor is the fact that my ISO is at 200, which is an ISO setting that you typically use in a bright environment. So let's make some adjustments and go to this next photo I have. So here for the next photo, what I did was, all I did was change my shutter speed. As you can see now, the photo is brighter. It's not bright, it's not beautifully lit, but it is bright enough that you can see that I have items in the frame. And my shutter speed is 1/25th. But it still isn't a long enough shutter speed. It still isn't a bright enough photo. So what am I going to need to do with these settings to make it brighter? Which is what leads me into photo number 3. For photo number 3, what I did was I kept my f-stop at 4.5. My shutter speed is 1/25th, but I upped my ISO to 400. So now we are looking at a brighter photo. My aperture is letting in a nice amount of light. So also remember, with an aperture setting of a smaller number, you're having less in focus for your focal range, which is really good for food photography. You don't want to have too much in focus. So a 4.5 is kind of a sweet spot for food photography, in my opinion. And then the shutter speed is slow enough that I'm letting in some light. And then with the ISO setting at 400, my sensor has become more sensitive to light, so it's going to absorb more. But again, look at this photo. It still isn't bright enough, right? Like, we do not want to post this photo to social media. We do not want to put this on our website and say, hey, come to our place. We have delicious food. No. So let's make another adjustment. All right. So this photo is much brighter. So how did I get it to be this bright? I made one adjustment, my aperture setting. I made it a 3.2. That means the hole got larger, so more light is being let in. My 400 ISO is making it more sensitive to light, and my shutter speed is slow. But it still isn't right. What if you're in a scenario where you actually want to be able to see more in focus? So currently we're looking at this pastry, and in the background, I have a fake potted plant. And it's soft, it's not too in focus. But what if you actually had something back there that you wanted your viewer to see? You wanted it more in focus. So it could be maybe a cake, or maybe ingredients that you use that are in your hamburger or the steak, or something that is in the foreground, your hero item. You still want them to see what those items are in the background. So how do we make this photo bright enough? That is what leads me to the next photo. So this photo right here, I want more in focus. So what do I have to do? I have to change my aperture setting. So I have to make it an 8. With an 8, there's less light. So I have to adjust my shutter speed or my ISO. But what I've done for this photo here is adjust my shutter speed. I'm leaving my shutter open longer. Full disclosure here, guys. 100% tip that you should always just tip. When using a slow shutter speed, use a tripod. Okay. I know when you go out and you buy a camera, you might actually have a sales associate that is telling you to buy a tripod, that they are great items, and you might feel like they're just trying to upsell you and get you to buy more things. But when you're taking photos of your food and you have to use a slow shutter speed, you want to use a tripod. Because if I had taken this photo handheld at 1/3 of a second for a shutter speed, it would all be blurry because the shutter speed is held way long open, and I myself cannot stay that still. I breathe. I might twitch. Who knows, So tripod. Now, for this next photo I'm showing you. Okay. It's an extreme situation, but it's one that happens, and something that I see frequently from beginner photographers is that you think, okay, I want to have a lot of light and I want a certain amount of area to be in focus. So your aperture is at 4.5 and you're indoors, so you're going to boost your ISO so it's around 400. You might even boost it higher. But for this day, I put it at 400. And so you need to absorb more light. So you're like, okay, I got my tripod set up. I've got my shutter speed. Let's crank it. And then you make your shutter speed at 0.5. Oh man, is your photo so overexposed now because you're letting in way too much light. So this is something that could happen, and finding a sweet spot is all going to be based on your environment, your preferences, because those past couple photos I showed you were the photos were bright enough. What you could do is if that's as bright as you can get your image without creating grain, is you could tweak it now in editing. You could take it to your phone and use an app on your phone to edit it. You could take it to your computer and use whatever you have there, like say Lightroom, to boost your exposure and make your adjustments there, if that's all that you're capable of doing. Try really hard not to go to the extreme, because if you blow your image up so it's way overexposed, you can't recover that information. I also want to point out, remember guys, I had just said that in my studio where my available light is, it's pretty dark to a camera. To my eyes, it's perfect for sitting down, working on the computer, you know, getting things done. But when taking photos, it's not bright enough. But as you can see, you can take a really dark environment, adjust your settings on your camera, and get a super bright photo. So my recommendation from here on out right now, guys, is I want you to take an item in your house. It could be an apple. It could be, you know, a loaf of bread. It could be anything that you have sitting around. Heck, it could be a box of Kleenexes. It could be anything. And I want you to take it to the environment that you're in, that you're going to be photographing in. I want to get your camera on a tripod and start playing with your settings. See what you like and what is coming out of the camera based on the available light that you are using. All right, everyone, we have reached the end of the video. We've gotten a lot of information in one short video. I hope it was helpful for you guys. If you have any comments or questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'm definitely gonna get back to you as soon as possible. And if you liked today's video, which I hope you did, give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in food photography and marketing your food business, hit that subscribe button because I'm here to help you guys level up, get noticed, and basically make some things easier for you. Alrighty, I'm signing off and saying goodbye. Have a nice day.